Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week, and this is the show where I review all the comics I've read this week in one show. We go least favorite to best pick of the week and everything in between. And before we get started, I do have a Kickstarter going on right now for my comic book, Like Father Like Daughter. If you're a fan of superhero books, this puts that genre on its head. It's about a high school girl. Father left her to become a full-time superhero. Everyone in the world loves him except for her, and then she inherits his abilities. There's some twists and turns along the way, including her mom being a super spy. So this is the grand finale of the series, so hopefully guys could go check that out. And of course at the end of the video we talk about the viewer's pick of the week, so sound out in the comments below your pick of the week for a chance to be featured on the episode. Now let's jump into this week's comics. I had 11 books, so a pretty solid sized haul, and number 11 for me was the biggest book of the week, which is Spider-Man issue 7, which is the introduction of Spider-Boy. I know, it's a little lower. I actually dropped this book because I didn't love Spider-Verse. I didn't love how many times we've gotten Spider-Verse. The first one was fine. The second one got a little duller. And now the third one, it's just so crowded and, in my opinion, not necessary. And with this one, most of the issue is all my issues with Spider-Verse, which is how crowded it is and just not really having a focal point of anything. And with this one, at the end, at least we do get the introduction of this Spider-Boy type character because of the events of Spider-Verse and this medallion, and they definitely leave the identity of him up in the air until, hopefully we'll get a story with him in the next couple of months or weeks, whenever we're going to end up getting that. And you get the amount of information you would have gotten if you didn't read the issue, if you just read some of the articles. We know that he's someone from the 616. We know that he is a boy, and that's about it. There's really only a page or two in this issue that describes him. Honestly, I'm being generous by saying 2 pages. There's probably just 1 page here, and then he runs off. He kind of has an attitude. Now, the topic of this video is it Alpha? That's kind of the first person that came to mind, because who is a young teenage boy who's related to Spider-Man? Another thing we learned in this issue, that he's related to Miles Morales. He knows both characters, and who can it be? With the costume design, the 2 things that's reminiscent to it is Miles Morales' character and costume because of the sneakers, and then the color scheme is Spider-Man 2099. But it's not from another universe. And who is related to both Miles and Peter? Miles and Peter tend to have very separate storylines. So who is someone who is related to both, which is kind of why Alpha's kind of out of the picture. I think Alpha was the big character that people were thinking. It's a Dan Slott original, a character that people didn't really like that much and was supposed to be an annoying sidekick. I don't know if Dan Slott would go the route of making him return. I think it would scratch people's heads, but maybe there's a redemption story there if it is Alpha. But honestly, after the information we got, I'm more confused than ever of who this character could be. I am going to at least pick up whatever Spider-Boy appears in. I might pick up the next issue because we're out of the Spider-Verse stuff, but I just haven't been very impressed with the newest volume of Spider-Man. Now, that was a long-winded review of Spider-Man, so let's move on to number 10, which is Radiant Pink, issue 4. And I wanted to like this series a lot more than I have. It's not a bad series. I'm obviously continuing it and seeing where it goes. But I don't love the off-Earth adventure. That's probably the thing I like the least here. I like the romance for the most part, but I feel like it's very rushed. They've already said I love you, and I'm like, wait, didn't they just get together last issue? Everything kind of feels very fast. But the things I did like the most with this issue is when we actually don't focus on Radiant Pink at all. When we focus on the friend, when we see the cameo of Radiant Black, then things feel connected. And then also when we get to see the bigger god-like Radiant Black creature, where I'm like, okay, this is connecting to Radiant Black and the events of Radiant Black. I like that. The artwork is still a little dark for me, and it's fine artwork, but it's just not my style. So overall, I gave it 3 stars. Not a bad issue by any means, but just not hooking me as much as I want to be hooked with this book. Moving on to number 9, which is Batman issue 134. I'm very torn with this issue, with this story arc, because, I like the idea of multiverses. I think they've done some interesting things with it. The Red Mask character being their version of Joker. We get to see some other appearances from other characters. which is fun, but I've seen so many multiverses with Batman. I'm like, all right, what makes this stick out compared to any other multiverse? And that was my biggest problem. Nothing really does. It doesn't really hook me. It's like, all right, cool, this is another multiverse. The thing I'm actually more interested in is the Tim Drake side of the story, which is like 6 pages, where Tim is trying to find Batman. That's a much more interesting story and almost has more plot than this other story where Batman just kind of landed into this random multiverse. And the artwork's not as strong as it usually is, and I also think the Tim Drake artwork is a bit stronger. So overall, giving 3 stars. It's not a bad arc, but I'm just not wowed by it. So giving that number 9 on the list. Moving on to number 8, which is Captain America, Sentinel of Liberty, issue 11. And things are definitely coming together in this issue. It's very much an action issue, but I like the little hints of possibly Peggy being a mole. We get to see Captain America's son return here, and as someone that doesn't know much about Captain America, they still kind of keep you on the edge of your seat of, all right, this player is over here, that player is here, and plays really well for an arc called Cold War. It feels a little different than other events we've gotten in the past where everything's just kind of all-out action war. This feels a little bit more methodical, which I enjoy, and the artwork is really solid for this book, especially for an action-heavy issue. So giving that 3 stars, and that is number 8. Moving on to number 7, which is Spider-Gwen Shadow Clones issue 2. I do like this arc, this miniseries, a little bit more than the multiverse one, because again, too many multiverses. Not saying there's not enough clones out there, but I like that there's a little bit more of a unique twist. We get to see a little bit more of a relationship between these clones, how they relate to each other, how they interact with Gwen's actual life. Look, it's still a one and done type story. I don't know if it's really progressing Spider-Gwen's character that much, but I think this is a more interesting premise. The artwork is clean. I'm interested to see where it goes. It's been a fun story so far. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 7. Moving on to number 6, new series from Vault, and that is The Nasty, issue 1. As a huge fan of horror films, especially slasher films, I was very much interested in this, and it's about this young boy. We see him grow up with this imaginary friend that's also a slasher. And we get to see his love for horror movies, and that's most of the issue until those horror movies kind of start becoming real. But the line between reality and imagination is definitely blurred here. You don't really know how it happened, and there's an event with an old movie, the scariest movie ever, that may play a part, but the lines are definitely blurred here, which I liked. I think they introduced the main character well. You like him, you like the way he loves movies, and then they introduced the imaginary friend pretty well. And it's just an interesting concept that I haven't seen before, and if you're a horror movie fan, I think you'll relate to this. Hopefully not relate to seeing a slasher everywhere you go, but I think the love of horror movies you'll really enjoy here. And the artwork really works for this too. It's not too gritty. It's almost cartoonish in a way, and I honestly think it works. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 6. And definitely going to pick up issue 2 for that one. Moving on to number 5, which is the end of this Flash arc, the 1 Minute War. And honestly, this has been one of the best superhero events I've read in a really long time. It's very consistent, it's character driven, there's a good beginning, middle, and end. This issue definitely relied a little bit more on the action and maybe even the villain, which the villain was kind of hollow, but I also think that's what makes this story work. But there's a lot of great character moments that makes this higher on my list. You know, Wally returning to his family, Iris returning back. And yes, there's no shocking moments that happen here, but I don't think every event needs that. Sometimes you just need a good beginning, middle, and end, a good conflict, some good character beats, some good character growth, because the characters do grow by the end. And we get to see, like I said, Iris and Barry are getting married again. Bart looks like he's going on his own adventure. There's a lot of good moments in this, and I think a good wrap for Jeremy Adams' arc here. And I liked it. If you haven't read this and you're looking for a solid event, a solid character story, go ahead and read it. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 5. Moving on to number 4, which is Saga, issue 63, I believe. I feel like there should be like hundreds of issues of Saga, but we're up to 63. And this one's more of a point A to point B. There's a lot more chess pieces being moved where the kids are trying to revive their father again, and maybe Squire taking it too far. And really, we get to see that premonition, or obviously our narrator, Haley, is in the future. So we're getting to see some of those things that she talked about come to fruition, with Squire killing someone and not really feeling guilty about it, all while their mom is trying to just make a living for them. So, the story's a little scattered. There's definitely a lot of characters they focus on. The artwork's great, as always. Great character work, great character acting, and some interesting tidbits added in this one. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 4. Moving on to number 3, Amazing Spider-Man. Surprisingly enough, issue 23 is probably one of the higher issues thus far for the whole entire run, because I feel like they built really well tension here. They really built the tension well, and we get to see Spider-Man just want to get back to MJ and not really know what happened to her, and it's him doing everything possible to do that, and that's why he teams up with Norman, and now you're kind of seeing a little bit behind the curtain of why MJ might be upset with him, and what happened during this 6-month period. And I just like the tension for this one. I enjoyed the character moments. There's some good action in this, some good guest appearances, and just how far Peter will go for MJ, but at the same time, it makes it weird of what's going on currently with MJ, and they're not together, and how much he hasn't fought for her, but we'll see where that ends up going. I even think John Romita Jr.'s artwork was a little stronger here. He's still definitely not my style of artist, but I think he did a better job in this issue. So overall, giving that 4 stars, and that is number 3. Moving on to number 2, a book I've been really, really pleasantly surprised with, and that is Adventures of Superman issue 2, John Kent, and This kind of has it all. We get to see a new power from John Kent. I think they dealt with the supporting characters really well. How John said bye to Jay, how he said bye to Lois, all while you have these really awesome multiverse characters like Val Zod and Red Tornado, Lois Lane, and seeing what happened to them. But the big moments is definitely at the end, where obviously John is being tortured by the person who tortured him and held him captive for so long, and he's getting a little PTSD from it, and then he's, trying his hardest to try to defeat the villain and try to win the day, but then Injustice, Gods Among Us Superman, who's very willing to kill people, kills him, kills Ultraman. You're like, whoa, okay, things are getting interesting, and I really like how they've been playing with the multiverses. This is definitely Tom Taylor's wheelhouse. I like that this book has a little bit more of a direction. The artwork's really good. There's just some really great moments in this one. I think this is a much better balanced volume than the previous one. So giving that 4.5 stars, and that is number 2. Moving on to number 1 of my favorite books on stands, and literally a book that never disappoints me, and that is Second Coming Trinity, issue 1. This is just such a good book. I love the commentary, I love the sarcasm, I love the character work. It's everything I enjoy in comics. With this issue, we don't get as much of Jesus, which makes sense because he was more of a main character of the last volume. And in this one, we get more of the superhero and his arch nemesis, because of course we need arch nemesis when it comes to superheroes. But it's bigger than that and deeper than that, because the arch nemesis is, we get to see behind the curtain of how he became a villain. And it's honestly the hero's fault. They went to high school together, and he was mean. He was the bully, the superhero, and that's what made this villain get to the point of where he did, because every single time he had hope, it was pulled under the rug, and we see what happens to him in the end of the issue. And what is the superhero going to do? Because one thing I really love about this series is see how much the superhero has changed, because he knows Jesus, because he's gotten these parables from him and kind of understands what compassion and forgiveness means now. And I just love that. I think it was really subtle. There's some just wonderful character work, and I enjoyed the lessons told here. I enjoyed the comedy told here, and just the in-depth character work for this series. And I'm already excited to see where this next volume is going to go. And the artwork is always so good. It's interesting because this issue actually didn't do the 2 different art styles, because the Jesus portion of the story / God portion of the story wasn't told as much, but it was interesting just to see the bright superhero stuff as well. So overall, giving that one 4.5 stars. That is my pick of the week. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno. Let me know in the comments below what your pick of the week was. I don't know if there was a viewer's pick of the week last week, so I don't think we got any comments about that. So be sure to comment so we can get featured on the video. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.